We are close to our what I'll call pre-COVID numbers. I pulled numbers today, and as of this morning, we're over 5,900 football officials, and we have approximately 3,500 volleyball officials. Water polo is also a fall sport that's just started. We have about 170 of those. It's never enough. However, we're not scrambling as much as we were last year and during the COVID time to get games covered. We're still having to ask schools to move from a Friday to a Thursday or a Saturday. But overall, we're getting where we need to be. We're just not quite there yet.
Awesome. So you said 5,900 statewide. What is the goal number?
Goal would be, we would like to see anywhere from 6,500 to 7,000. And that encompasses covering the games that we have now, but bringing in new blood to take the place of those that are, on their way out, that have reached the tip or the top of their career doing it and saying, you know what, it's time for somebody else to come in and take my place. So there's a lot of variables that go into that. If we didn't have another middle school or high school open up anywhere in the state, then that 6,500 would get us at a minimum of covering everything. But with the way that, some districts and the population growth throughout the state, and for every high school program that opens and you take the feeder schools that go underneath it, we've done some test models numbers wise, and we're looking at, we need about 24 to 27 officials per school. When you factor in all of the sports that come with that. So the number is constantly growing. It doesn't lower itself on the threshold. It's always going up. So I think we'll get there one day, just we're not there yet.
I have several follow-ups from that. But first of all, I guess I'll ask about specific East Texas numbers. How do we stand here in terms of football officiating?
So as of this morning, the East Texas chapter is looking at approximately 135 members. And the East Texas chapter is basically based out of Longview. So they cover that area. Tyler is looking at 201 members. And then down to the south of y'all, down towards Lufkin and the Piney Woods, Stephen F. Austin area, they have 87. So, when you add that up, you're looking at a little over 400 officials to cover the East Texas group that goes from, let's say, Lufkin all the way up to Texarkana and everywhere in between, and all the way over to Marshall and the Louisiana border. And Tyler will come west, excuse me, over to I-45 around Corsicana and Ennis. And so it's a pretty big part of the state there. If you looked at the state of Texas and looked at the map and kind of split the state, in quarters, they've got that top right quarter where that's a lot of area to cover, big schools and small schools. So they definitely could use more.
So if you could give a guesstimate of how many you would like to have in that area, what would it be?
Oh, we'd like to see it double. For that area, we would like to see that double. I mean, for the East Texas chapter, if they grew by 30 or 40%, then they would have that influx, what I talked about a moment ago, of not only being able to get the games covered, but have members coming in that could be trained to take the place of people that are ready to retire. And for Tyler, if they had if they got a third of what they have now, would put them at about 275. Then the same thing there. It's just like the domino effect. And the same way for, SFA for that area down there around Lufkin, they probably need 125 officials or to cover what they have. Some of those games, I know that this week 1, which is next weekend, the season's right upon us. We've got, I believe in the SFA area, so that area south of y'all, the Houston chapter is having to send some of their crews north to help cover those games. Throughout the state, we're moving crews from, the San Antonio area up to, the Brownwood and Stephenville area to help cover some games. We've got a crew from Permian Basin, the Midland Odessa area that's coming to a school that's southwest of Fort Worth to, cover some games. Most of these are because we don't have officials in that area and we're having to bring other um, chapters in to help cover it. But we're also working an initiative where we're trying to get um, some of the outlying chapters exposure to the metropolitan areas for those coaches and those schools to see that there are crews that are in Permian Basin or San Angelo or the Con Valley, Brownwood, El Paso, that there are crews in those chapters that can come in and work some of these higher profile playoff games. And so some people like to use spread the wealth, and I don't know if that's a term that I would use, but it's just to get them exposure to where they may not ever be seen. And so this is a perfect opportunity to say, hey, for the San Antonio chapter to tell the Rio Grande Valley chapter, hey, we've got a couple of games up here and we're going to let you guys, we're going to swap crews. We're going to send some San Antonio crews to the Valley, and the Rio Grande Valley, you're going to send a couple of crews to San Antonio, and let these guys get some exposure and let coaches become familiar with them and see them. And it's a pilot program we started last year. We're doing it all across the state. Um, it doesn't mean that we're able to cover more games that way. We're just getting officials the exposure. But in some of those areas, it is helping out without having to ask, a school, hey, we just can't cover you tonight. You're going to need to play on Thursday or Saturday. Um, and we're having to spread that around, JD, to where in the past, it's been, they were just asking the 1A schools, the 6-player football schools, hey, can you move? Or asking the TAPS, the private schools, hey, we need you to move to a different day. That's that world that we lived in then is not the world that we live in now, to where that's going up to the 4A and the 5A level, and telling the chapters, if you're going to ask a 1A school to move their date, you're going to need to go find a 4A, 5A, or 6A and ask them, hey, y'all need to move your date too, to where there's some equitable balance there, to where just, the 6A, the 1A, I mean, the 1A programs that play 6-player football aren't being picked on, for lack of better terms.
Yeah.
And that's happening not only in football, but that's happened in volleyball. Um, the there's a kind of a difference, and I don't know if it's worth getting into, but I think it'll help people understand about, if their program is affected in moving a game or whatever. There is a state law that says that you can only play one game per school calendar week. And so that calendar week starts technically at 12:01 a.m. on Monday morning, but for layman's terms, we're gonna say at the start of school Monday, and that ends on the last instructional day of the week. So if it is let's just say a 5-day week, Monday through Friday, then for a football program, they can play Friday night, which means they're outside of that week. But like for volleyball or for basketball, most games are like on Tuesdays and Fridays for the varsity and some of the sub varsity. Uh, if we've had to get them to move to like a Monday and a Thursday, well, if they're not in a 4-day school week, if they're in a 5-day school week, they can't play that Thursday game because then they would be playing 2 games during that instructional period. So when you factor all of this in, it really gets, um, it can become a scheduling nightmare. And yes, we have more availability of officials on what we call our off days or our lighter days. Um, and we certainly, if a school is willing to move, then it helps even the playing field, not necessarily with the quality of officiating, but sometimes that plays into effect. And so there's the schedulers. I don't think any of our schedulers are paid enough because of the balancing act that they have to do between the members, who are independent contractors. As an official can decide whether to take that assignment or not. They're not paid by the chapter. They're contracted by the school as an independent contractor. So it's an agreement between the school and the official, and the chapter just facilitates that assignment. So when you're a scheduler and you're looking at, I've got to fill, and I'll just for easy numbers, I've got 50 games to fill, and each game has 5 spots. All right, I've got to come up with 250 bodies. Well, if I only have, like Tyler, 201 bodies in my chapter, where am I going to get those other 49 from? What if somebody in that number of 201 drops out because they're sick, they've got obligations at home? It's just, I mean, it's like a well-oiled machine trying to piece this all together. So we need more officials. You can never get enough. And when you think you've reached that threshold, all of a sudden, gosh, I need 10 more bodies. I've got to call another chapter and say, hey, can you spare anybody this week? I've got 2 games I can't cover. And so we're working on that now. For week 1, we've got some games that we're having to bring out of town, what I'll call out of town crews in. And then we've got some schools that have agreed to move games so that they can play. But, when you think about what Friday night football means to that small town school and to the big town schools, they want to play on Friday night. Now, for like in the Dallas Fort Worth area where you've got one school district that has 3 high schools, but 1 stadium, well, they've got to play on a Thursday and a Friday, and they alternate that around. But when you're a small town team and the biggest event in town is that Friday night football game, you want to play on Friday night. You don't want to get that phone call Monday and say, hey, coach, we just don't have anybody unless you play Thursday or Saturday. Well, it's the domino effect. We had a situation last year where uh, the chapter didn't know that it was this team's homecoming game, and they had arranged for a parade and a bounce house for some kids and it was just the whole town, a big to do for that whole town. And they got called by the chapter and said, we need you to move. And the school said, we're not moving. We can't, we're obliged to stay here. And it wasn't until that morning, that Friday morning, Thursday had already passed. So if they weren't going to be able to play this Friday, they were going to have to do it Saturday. And it wasn't until that Friday morning that we could confirm that we had a crew that would come up and work that game from the Houston area. So That's the kind of world, that's the kind of things that are behind the scene that the public doesn't see or hear about. And so this kind of leads me into something else, that the abuse that officials take, not just in football and not just in volleyball, but in all of the sports. It makes it hard for us to retain our officials when when officials get the abuse that comes from some of the behavior of the fans, the parents, even some coaches, even some players. It just thinks, why am I giving up my Tuesday afternoon to come work this seventh grade game when I've got these fans that are wearing me out? Or why am I coming and working this Friday night game when I could be hanging out with the guys, just because. So that's another area that we need to work on in all of the sports. And I think we're there. I think we're getting there. We've partnered with Stephen Mackey from Two Words Professional Development on a program called the Texas Way. And you can Google it, but it's just a program that's being have made available to coaches and for coaches to show to their players in school. And we've signed up with it for officials to get them to watch it. And it just talks to them about the pillars of sportsmanship, showing respect and being yourself and treating others the way you want to be treated. And it's an excellent program. So we're excited about the start of this year. If our numbers keep going up, we should be, I don't know that we'll be 100%, but right now we're sitting better than we were last year at this time, and we've still got a week before we kick off.
So we are doing a little bit better than last year. What do you attribute
Yes.
it to?
I think I attribute it to the recruiting that some of the chapters have done, more so the retaining of some of the members. Our issue has always been not so much getting them in the door, it's keeping them once we have them. And if we can keep them past year 3, we've probably set that hook to where they're not going anywhere short of a job change or a family, some kind of a family event change that requires that. It's the person that comes in at year 1, and do they have a good experience, a great experience, or a bad experience? And if they have one of the first two, then they're probably going to come back for year 2. If they have a bad experience, 90% of 9 out of 10 of those members we lose. It's just like, I didn't sign up for this. This isn't for me. Um, our goal is after year 3, and you look and say, we track the data, and we can look at chapter retention rates and say, okay, for chapter A here, you retained 12% of your new members in 2021, and you retained 30% of your new members in 2022, and you retained 6% of your new members in 2023. So what happened? And it all starts at the local chapter level. How are those new members made, to feel welcome coming into the chapter? Well, they have always been paid travel. Part of the UIL Constitution and Contest Rules, Section 1204, shows out shows a fee schedule per sport, per game in each sport, and then there's travel allotments up to from 1 to 30 miles, 1 to 31 miles, and then 31 to 60 miles, and then 61 to 90 miles. It's a flat rate. And then anything over 90 miles from that chapter's center point to the venue, meaning where the game is played. If it's over 91 miles, then it goes to what we call a portal to portal, where it's actual mileage paid from the official's residence to that game site and back. So they've always had the travel. What we did get past was a 10-year pay plan for all of the sports. So now each sport knows when they're going to get a game fee increase for the next 10 years. And that took effect at the start of last year. So we know that in 23, we got an increase of this amount for whatever game and whatever sport you were working. And we know that the next increase is going to happen in the 26-27 school year. So the beauty about that is that not only do the officials know what they're going to get paid for working a particular game, the schools, with the financial situation that we're in right now with the legislature and school funding or whatnot, schools are able to budget. They know that if they have, and again, I'm just picking a number, if they're going to have 100 sub-varsity football games that they have to pay for, and let's say that they are junior high games, and that amount is $55, and they're scrimmaging 3 officials per game, then that's 100 games times 3 officials, which is 300 times $55 times whatever that travel is from that venue to um, that chapter center point. So there's a lot of detail there, but it's easy for them to budget to know, okay, I need to set aside X amount of dollars for the officials in this sport and this sport and this sport and this sport. So that works to the benefit of both. Um, there's a meal allotment paid to the official if they're traveling over the 90 miles. If they're going over the 90 miles, there's a rider fee that's paid to the officials. I mean, look, I think you'll hear people say this, and I know you hear it coming from the school side. The officials are never paid enough for what they do. I don't think anybody would argue with that. However, for people that are coming in, this is a good way to supplement your income. We've got officials that need those junior high game checks to put food on the table and to buy diapers for the kids and everything else. And then we've got other officials that take it and donate their money to a scholarship fund. If you're doing it strictly for the money, that's not who we are and what we do. You won't be very successful at it, but having that compensation is a nice reward for giving back to the sport that you love, whatever sport that is.